Do not fear them. Do not fear any of them.
On the 20th of November 2003, James Ignatius O'Rourke McMahon was elected councillor for the Failsworth East Ward of Oldham. Deeply ambitious, he ruthlessly rose to power, and by 2011 he was already leader of the council. In 2015, exploiting a Labour Party loophole, he became MP for Oldham West and Royton. If only the people of the town knew then what they now know.
Do not fear them. Do not fear any of them.
Sunday the 8th of December 2024. My name is Raja Amir. This is a Recusant 9 transmission. We need to, I'm sure you all understand, we need to start this evening with our deepest sympathy to Julie Hayward. I know George, we lost George, I think earlier on this morning. He'd been in hospital for some time. Like so many people who get taken to hospital with one thing, they deteriorate, and I'm genuinely, I don't know what to say. This journey has been so difficult for me, and I would not be where I am now if it wasn't for people like George. The glint in his eye, I think, it's not that I'll miss, I'll forever treasure, I think, the glint in his eye. And the last time I saw him, I'd gone round to visit him, and had a cup of tea with him, and he was holding court, and I was waiting in the kitchen, waiting my turn to go in and see him. But he was a character, and he'll be missed. He'll be genuinely missed. So Julie, we are a small community, so if there's anything you need from any of us, I'm sure we'll be there for you. So he was a special man, a very, very special man. I still remember the one time I actually saw him outside his house. He'd come to court. He'd come to my plea hearing. It was during darkest COVID, where they weren't letting people into the court, and I was dragged in, if you all remember. And he'd got dressed up, he'd worn a suit. The man looked smart. He looked really smart, and he'd come out to support me. And I remember going home that evening thinking, wow, I think he was 95 at the time. He's come out to support me because he believed in me, and I will forever be grateful. And I'm sure our paths will cross again in one form or another, George. There's more to this universe than any of us, I think, comprehend, and I think I'll leave it there. Okay, moving on. There is a meeting on Thursday. It's the meeting with the mayor at the old Sainsbury's site in Oldham. There's a school there now. I think it's an interesting school. That's a conversation for another day. I had hoped that enough people would come back with questions and issues, and we could go en masse and really leave our mark at that meeting. That's now not going to happen. I think there's only about 3 or 4 people who've come back wanting to take questions there. I have no issue with supporting you with those questions, so if you want, please do get in touch with me, and I'll have a one-on-one session with you and firm up your questions if you still want to go. But I think the way we were going to go isn't going to happen now, and sadly, from the feedback I've had, the plea last week really was that our politicians, our elected leaders, those who've come forward to represent us, are the ones who should be representing us in these environments. And unfortunately, if they had been, what they would have done is posted on Facebook, because most of them use Facebook in one form or another, and said, I'm going to this meeting on behalf of the people of my ward. Is there any issue anyone wants me to raise? And I've reviewed the Facebook posts, and I've not seen anything like that from any of the councillors that we've elected, and that's disappointing. But at the same time, there's no election now for another 18 months or so I'd imagine a lot more will change in the lead up to the next local elections. So if you are going on Thursday, please get in touch with me, and I will help you tidy up your questions for you. No problem whatsoever. I can do that on a one-on-one basis. The second point I need to get out of the way before we start this evening's transmission is, of course, our meal on Tuesday evening. It's an annual thing at the Milan. It's become an annual thing. I value it very much. because it's one of the few times where I get to see so many of you face to face. So to me, it's a special occasion, and it does uplift me, because it is a lonely role. And the last few weeks, where I've been putting out content challenging senior Labour Party leaders, it's took me a while to realise, but I felt apprehensive again. And once I reflected and understood, it was an anxiety that the police were going to hammer down my door again, and that has left its mark on me. So moments when we all get together, I draw strength from, if I'm honest with you. So it'd be lovely to see as many of you as possible. Some of you have been in touch to say you don't want to eat, you're just might be passing by. That's absolutely fine. The people who run the restaurant are very old friends of mine, so they will be as hospitable to you if you're just passing as if you were one of the most regular customers there, because they are family to me, and you are family to them. So I'm sure they would love to see as many of you there as possible. And if there is an issue with the cost, I think it's about £20 we pay. If there is an issue, I think one or two of you got in touch and said it's Christmas, it's tight. It's not a problem, just turn up. I will cover your costs. If there is an issue, I will cover your costs. It'd be lovely just to share some food with you, or share a smile with you and see all of you. So please, 7 o'clock on Tuesday, because who knows where we'll be this time next year. A Borough Betrayed was the title of this night's transmission, and it's to do with the financial mismanagement and the fleeing leadership of Oldham Council. Now, in a moment, I'm going to play you the cabinet meeting, the live cabinet meeting that took place. It's only 5 minutes, so don't worry about it. And I'm going to play that for you. And it focuses very much on a statement read out by Abdul Jabbar. Now, if you know Abdul Jabbar, he's the finance chief, and he's been the finance chief for such a long time. And of course, OBA. So the OBA cartel I talk about, well, Abdul Jabbar is well and truly OBA. And during the height of COVID, we mocked him because there was a building he was connected to, his family was connected to, where they'd registered like 5 or 6 businesses who were getting COVID grants, and the shed sold samosas, so that was another business as well. So I'm sure we've had much entertainment with Abdul Jabbar. He is one of Jim McMahon's henchmen, if I can use the term henchman. And I have no love for him, but the truth is he wins elections time in, time out. No one's been able to oust Abdul Jabbar in Coldust. The closest, I think, was Montaz when he came within 72 votes or something. But no one's been able to oust Abdul Jabbar. If there are cartel kingpins, if there are people who sit at the top of the councillor tree, Abdul Jabbar is one of them. And he comes from that Labour Party historical voter base that predates a lot of the Arud Shah sectarian nonsense. So he does genuinely draw support from Labour Party members and supporters, irrespective of their race or religion. And Abdul Jabbar wants you to believe that everything is fine. We recall a couple of council meetings ago, he stood up. I can guarantee we will not go bankrupt. And he's tried to reassure the people of Oldham that the council's finances are in order. He's been doing that non-stop. It reminds me of Chemical Alley. Yep. Nothing to see here, nothing to see. Was it that Iraqi, not Chemical Alley, the Iraqi guy, the Iraqi, was it Aziz, his name? General, when Iraq was being invaded, and he was like, oh, nothing to see here, nothing to see here. And I suppose he wants you to believe that there's nothing to see, with news that both the Director of Finance and the Director of Economy are heading for the exit. None of this has been published on Oldham Council's news updates, and none of this has been reported by a new Charlotte Hall, from the Local Democracy Service. They all look the same, by the way. Vegan type, nothing against vegans, but you know what I mean. Vegan type, oat milk latte, cycling, young women from Charlton or Didsbury. Nothing from her. Even though she's paid by the BBC to report on local democracy, you'd think the Local Democracy Service would be reporting that the Director of Finance and the Director of Economy are both fleeing. And I use that word, fleeing, because they've not been in the position long enough to move on. When you get to this level, you don't jump from one job to another without giving it a good 5 years. 3 years to 5 years at least. Otherwise, it just doesn't work. Thank you. The Iraqi Information Minister. Thank you. I'm back on my Vimtos. I felt like a Vimto this evening. So, first of all, her name is Sarah Johnston. She's had enough. She arrived in Oldham Council with much fanfare as Director of Finance, and there's also a very legal position, a Section 151 officer. And her job was critical. It was to ensure that the council enjoyed financial health and stability. A year, 18 months, I think, at a push. Barely a year into her role, she's leaving. And my information is she's off to Wigan Council, so she doesn't want to be here. She's gone. Why? Perhaps the answer lies in a quiet cabinet meeting that took place last week, hidden away in the small print, as always. But as always, I have the small print. There's a projected £20 million overspend halfway through the financial year. £20 million. And if there was a potential drain of 23 million, because these things happen, the council's reserves would just be left with £34 million. Now, if I had £34 million in the bank, I'd be great. But for a council, £34 million, you're down to your last pennies. I think there's a minimum threshold of what they've got to keep, for cash flow purposes. And I think that minimum amount is 20 million. So they are in a complete and utter mess. Now, it's not hard to connect the dots, is it? Would you? Would you want to be associated with this council? I'm not even sure, because I speak to people in the council and other councils, senior figures, and people don't quite believe the scale of corruption that infests Oldham, even after I've shared with them. And then they go away and look, and some come and work here, and then they realise that actually what I'm talking about is true. We have a council leader who hangs off the arm of a convicted heroin dealer. There's no ifs, there's no buts. That's the truth. We have multiple councillors who have dubious pasts, let's say, and the cover-up of the grooming and gang rape of children is real. And as you all know, 2 meetings ago in the council chamber, the council, supported by Councillor Brian Hobin, a convicted fraudster, and Mincy Boy, and you can decide whether he was sober or not in the meeting, voted to prevent an audit of the finances of this town. They voted to block an audit. They voted to block calling in forensic accountants to make sure that everything was in order and no fraud had been committed, no millions had been stolen, no dodgy land deals had been taken place. They blocked that. Why would you block that? So Sarah Johnston, and whatever's gone on in the background that we will never hear about, has gone, or is going. But she's not the only one going. I mean, you wouldn't want any part of this. There's a man called Paul Clifford. He's the Director of Economy. He's also packing his bags. Paul Clifford got his job under Amanda Chadderton. Type it in Google, you'll find a nice article with Amanda Chadderton singing his plaudits. He was brought in to deliver the £285 million Creating a Better Place programme. That's the scheme that is meant to build over 2,000 homes in the town centre. Clearly, that vision now lies in tatters. The game changer that was Prince's Gate, remember? Where they're going to have a Marks and Spencer's and a hotel and all sorts. They're going to build high-rise flats there, and we'll get on to Angela Rayner later to see who's going to be housed in those flats. But Clifford's departure raises serious questions about the viability of Oldham's redevelopment ambitions. If the council's top executives, and remember, these aren't the first two to go, they're the last two in a long line of chiefs, senior executives to be fleeing this town. One after another, gone. If the council's top executives are walking away, well, what does that say about leadership and direction in this borough? Can you imagine? If you're, for instance, the head of planning, would you want to go into a meeting with Mincy Boy in case he's Sieg Heiled in the meeting, or turned up wearing a Nazi uniform or a hip flask? Or worse, so why are they walking away? Because the leadership in this town is in disarray. These resignations are devastating for Arud Shah's administration, who's already plagued by controversy. Do you remember the Deputy Chief Executive, Saeed Osman, left? Emma Barton, who was meant to be the Chief Executive and now isn't, has been sidelined in some weird position. And we've seen Arood Shah, desperate to try and prop up her position, appoint Shelley Kipling, her drinking partner, as interim Chief Executive. Now she became interim Deputy Chief Executive. She's been internally promoted, and I can't get to the bottom of it. I can't work out when Shelley Kipling last had a genuine external competitive interview to work in Oldham. And if you follow Shelley Kipling's career, you can trace it all the way back to being part of the team, the communications team, that was involved in the cover-up of the grooming and gang rape of little girls in our town. But she's Shah's drinking partner, and now she's interim chief executive. Then there's Alexander Bogatov, interim borough solicitor, previously interim assistant borough solicitor. Again, another one we can't seem to make sense of when you last had an externally, fit and proper interview process, where he went through a competitive process to get a job in Oldham. Can't find the documents. What I do know is that Bogatov tried and failed to take an injunction out against me using your money on behalf of Jim McMahon and the Labour Party. Crossed the line, failed. The law firm that he hired using your money and spending tens of thousands of pounds of your money, in the end ran away because they knew I would see them in court. He tried to blackmail me, saying whatever costs they'd incur, they'd pass on to me. What bald head, shiny head Bogatov doesn't understand that he might have beaten Mr. UK in shoving a banana down his budgie smugglers, but that doesn't intimidate me at all. Bogatov, we know about Bogatov, is that the Conservatives have reported him to Greater Manchester Police for misconduct in public office. He interfered with a council meeting. Now the police have failed to investigate him. The police have failed to respond to a political party that has gone to them with a serious allegation and emboldened Bogatov. Sorry, my internet's showing low data or no data, so if it goes off, I'll bring it back on. Let's come back. Emboldened Bogatov has now blocked the Conservative motion due at the next council meeting. Well, you've been appointed through a backdoor process by Arood Shah and her mates. Then your loyalty obviously is to Arood Shah and your mates and her mates. Same with Shelley Kipling. Why is anyone surprised? Indeed, it's only any day now. Irish hear me for business development. Someone told me he's an online content creator now. Maybe they'll hire him in the comms team, and Shelley Kipling will take him under her wings. A very good evening, Louise. How are you? Always nice to have you join us, Louise. So, I'm not at all surprised that these people are leaving, because across Greater Manchester and beyond, Oldham is increasingly being red flagged as a town that is ungovernable, that is corrupt, and that the criminal cartels aligned with senior politicians have infiltrated. And trying to take me to court is not going to stop that. So, let's play this. Sorry, it's lost in between. My email's loading again because everything didn't it, for a second. So here, give me 1 second. Let's answer this first. How do we get the mainstream press to expose this lot? I put out a series of tweets last week. Over 200,000 people viewed each of them. Sorry, I tell a lie, I don't want to exaggerate. One was over 200,000, and the other one, I'll tell you, I'll just bring it up. Just give me 1 second. $187,000. Pleading. It was a plea. I have a dossier of evidence, and I do have a dossier of evidence. And it was a plea to mainstream journalists, mainstream press, to take this on. Only two got back to me, both from GB News. One was Charlie, is it Peters, his surname? And the other one was one of the presenters. Now, what they want is the information off me. I don't want to hand over the information. I want an interview. And I'll tell you why I want an interview, and it's not to promote myself, because those of you who know me know I'm nothing like that. It's because I believe I am the only person that can articulate what the evidence demonstrates. No one's got back to me. Louise, that says a lot, doesn't it? I'm not hiding behind a fake profile. I'm a man who ran for Parliament, kept my deposit, 20-year plus distinguished career in public service, member of the British Empire, security vetted, cleared, all of that. I think I'm presentable. Don't think if you put me in front of a camera, in front of national news, I've sat in rooms with world leaders. I know how to behave myself. I know how to speak to an audience. No, I think that might be it. And I think Ofcom are controlled by someone else, don't you, Tony? Because we're not just fighting Arud Shah or Jim McMahon, are we, here? We're not just fighting Bogatov or Kipling or Dirty Harry Cafferel. And it's remarkable that we're still here fighting, because we are fighting an establishment that needs to protect those who serve it. And so they will look the other way, even if they've been involved in the gang rape, cover-up of the gang rape of children, even if they are directly linked to some of the most dangerous criminals this country has. But I wanted to put that out on Twitter and see what happened. And there are people who say, well, publish it on Twitter. No, because it won't go anywhere. And the ones who are saying, do this or else you'll be discredited or do that. Listen, I've navigated it this far using my experience, instincts, and I think we know where we'll go next. And I think that's very clear where we need to go next, because we've got some time. We'll write and publish a book. Concise, clear, in one place. I'll self-publish it. I have no issue doing that. I know what to do there. And we'll see where that takes us. Because we are capable, more than capable, of telling our own stories, sharing our own experiences. And one of the reasons I've come to realise why they don't want my take on what's going on is because I take it to a different place. I take it away from a place of oversimplified prejudices. As someone who has been repeatedly described as far right, recorded forever in the history books of Parliament, instead of laughing and saying, oh, we're all far right now, to hide some genuine prejudices, what I do is say, well, actually, no. This is what far right really is, and this is what I'm doing. And if anything, I'm taking people away from the far right, which is what this government trained me to do. Not just the far right, but in the main Islamists, taking people away from being radicalised and strapping suicide vests and going and blowing things up and people up and children up, because that's what my life was. So that's what I will do. I'll write a book over the next 12 months. We'll get it self-published, sell it on Kindle for 99p or whatever. It makes no difference. It's about the purpose is to get it out there. And those who want paper copies, I'm sure we can do a couple of print runs. And you'll come to see why it is that in the end, not only do those who we stand against fear me, but those who should be on our side are too scared to be on our side. And yes, of course, I have a dossier, of course, a paper copy. Paul, there'll be hardback copies, it's no problem. Because we've got some time. Nationally, this government is a car crash and it'll only get worse. And the reaction in the general public is a lurch to the right and perhaps the extreme right. And there are people who don't want that, but they still want answers. And we from this town, who are ahead of the curve on this, because everything the government is doing to people now, they've done to us already, and we've come through it, we can and we will end up in a place where we inform and shape the politics of not just this town, but the country. So, as to what I'm going to do, that's what I'm going to do. Of course, so now I'm not fighting multiple court cases, and there's no elections to campaign for us for the next 12 months. Let me play this.
So, welcome to Cabinet, colleagues. We'll launch straight in. So, item number 1 is apologies for absence. Any apologies received? Item number 2 is urgent business. I don't think I've received any. No. Item 3, declarations of interest. Does any member have an interest to declare in any matter on the agenda? Yeah, go on. Fine. Thank you. Abdul, did you want to come in? Or was it just to make the same point?
This is in relation to the minutes of the shareholder committee. So, as Alex said, they're here for approval.
Okay.
But we wanted to declare that. Thank you.
Thanks. Item 4, public question time. Thank you. Item 5 minutes. Does Cabinet agree the minutes of the meeting held on the 18th of November 2024? Thank you. Item 6, Treasury Management Half-Year Review Report 24-25. Councillor Jabbar.
Thank you, Leader. So this is a rather technical report, but it's very important that the Cabinet considers this. So the Council has adopted the Chartered Institute of Public Finance and Accountancy Treasury Management in the Public Services, which requires the Council to approve as a minimum Treasury Management Strategy, a mid-year report and an outturn report. This report advises the Cabinet of the performance of the Treasury Management function of the Council for the first half of 2024-25 and provides comparison of performance against the 2024-25 Treasury Management Strategy and the Treasury Management Potential Borrowing Indicators. This report sets out the key Treasury Management issues for members' information and reviews and outlines the following. Firstly, an economic update for the first half of 2024-25, giving you an external context. Secondly, the net borrowing and investment, which is obviously related to the Council and local context. A review and update of the Council's current Treasury Management position, Council borrowing, Council Treasury Management activity, Treasury performance for the first half of the year, compliance, Treasury Management prudential indicators. I'd like to take the report as read. However, there are no significant changes from the Treasury Management strategy approved by the Council in February. What I would like to draw the Cabinet's attention to, however, is the fact the additional borrowing of £25 million has been undertaken to finance capital programme, which was all anticipated. So it was already in our programme, so this borrowing already was flagged up in the programme. We have an approved approach to flexible use of capital receipts. This year we're using this to finance 47 voluntary redundancies approved last month. This will generate ongoing savings of £1.6 million, which is now incorporated in the MTFS. The other section I'd like to highlight, Chair, is the changes in the minimum revenue position. Follows a recommendation from the Council Treasury Management Advisors. This will generate some short-term savings, but the details still being worked out through and requires sign-off from the external auditors. I think those are the key points, Chair, I'd like to bring to your attention. Obviously, happy to take any questions from colleagues, and the Finance Director is here to answer any technical questions. Thank you, Chair.
Thank you, Councillor Jabbar. Does any member wish to comment on that item? No? Okay, well, that brings us to the close of business today, so thank you very much.
Thank you, Chair.
So that was the Cabinet meeting. Sorry, I'll just take my headphones off. There was a time when I used to do these sessions and I had a mic right next to me and I needed my headphones on, but I prefer not to have them on anymore. And I prefer not to have the mics. I'm pointing toward the mic. I prefer not to have the mic next to me. Sheila Curley's just been in touch. Garrett hasn't got a link. I'm not sure why she hasn't got a link, because you've all got a link, and I sent it out to both the £10 and £25 supporters. So I have sent her a link. So if anyone is in contact with her, please send her the link. Not sure why she hasn't got a link. Sorry, I laugh, when people send me messages whilst I'm not sure what you want me to do once I'm midway through doing this. I get your frustrations, but never mind. I lost my trail of thought. Okay. The Cabinet meeting only spoke about one agenda item that we knew of, and then the meeting was finished. Lack of responses. Now, the lack of responses are because, Paul, they've got to release this footage online as part of the legal requirements of transparency. So the conversations and discussions they have are separate. The people who are in that cabinet are just the 8 or 9 people of Arud Shah's inner circle. So first of all, they've got a £25 million overspend that they knew about. What he omits from saying is that there was a £25 million overspend that they knew about, and the aim was to reduce that overspend. We know we're going to be in trouble, and it could be up to £25 million. What are we doing to mitigate that? Oh, nothing. So we say, well, we knew about it anyway, £25 million. Secondly, he talks about 47 redundancies. And when I bring up the paperwork, you'll see that 47 redundancies, and it doesn't mention it. It doesn't speak about it. It talks about 47 redundancies, and he talks about a £1.6 million ongoing saving as a consequence of those 47 redundancies, and they factor that into the going forward budgets. There is not a chance in hell that a council has got rid of 47 members of staff on voluntary redundancies and not had to replace those jobs. And if they don't have to replace those jobs, they should never have that those people should never have been working in those jobs in the first place. Agreed? But what he admits is that those 47 redundancies cost £2 million. And that £2 million comes out of capital receipts. What does that mean? It means assets that they've sold. Your assets that they've sold is now paying the redundancies of staff who want to leave. And so far it's cost them £2 million. And if he's sweating, he's not just sweating for, number one, the £25 million overspend, number two, the £2 million in redundancies. He's actually sweating for what he said at the end. No one speaks up on it. Well, why would they? I'll bring it up. I'll put my headphones back on. I want you to hear this bit.
Which was all anticipated. So it was already in our program. So this borrowing already was flagged up in the program. We have an approved approach to flexible use of capital receipts. This year we're using this This year we're using this to finance 47 voluntary redundancies approved last month. This will generate ongoing savings of £1.6 million, which is now incorporated in the MTFS.
So you can see, sorry, I'll do it this way. So you can see, he's not talking about the £2 million. He's completely omitted the £2 million. This is the bit I want you to hear.
The other section I'd like to highlight, Chair, is the changes in the minimum revenue position. Follows a recommendation from the Council Treasury Management Advisors. This will generate some short-term savings, but the details still being worked out through and requires sign-off from the external auditors. I think those are the key points, Chair, I'd like to bring to your attention. Obviously, happy to take any questions from colleagues. And the
minimum revenue position. Let's try that one. The public document pack, buried on the council's webpage. The agenda, blah, blah, blah. Massive document. Raja, what did you do on your Sunday? Oh, one of the things they did was meticulously go through this document. This is the 6-month position they've got. I'll get to a page here too where I'll stop it so you can see it. That's the net borrowing for this year. You can see 156 million and 87 pounds so far. The total borrowing 30th of September 2024, 206,650. You can see that there. These are the borrowing limits. The maximum they can borrow, the authorised limit is 536 million. So they've not reached that target yet. It's like your credit card limit. Liability benchmark, existing forecast borrowing. This is their own figures. You can see the 181 million as of the 31st of March 2024. So that's 6 months ago. 31st of March 2025. You can see the figure there. 230 million. Following year it goes up to 270 million. And remember, it goes higher and higher and higher. And the year after that, it goes to 275 million. The liability benchmark, 275 million. So they're just 20 million pounds. As demonstrated by the liability benchmark in the table above, the council expects to be a long-term borrower to finance the expected capital spend. And that's a rather ambitious graph of how they think the debt will come down, and it takes you all the way up to 2048. Time frame about the borrowing, it's 2.8 I wanted to show you. Let me just bring it back to 2.8 first. 2.8.2, when setting the 24-25 budget on 28th of February 2024, Council approved the use of £2.6 million of capital receipts to fund transformational activity within directorates. That means redundancies, in gobbledygook speech. Since the date, the Council has invited applicants for voluntary redundancy, and 44 applications, he says 47, but in this document it says 44, have been accepted with a total cost of just under £2 million. So there you go. This will increase the total use of capital receipts to £4.6 million. and further details are outlined in Appendix 2. So we go along to the appendices. First of all, you need to see this. Capital financing requirement, their own documents. In 2023 it was 488 million and it's gone up. Now total debt, their own figures there, the total debt, £536,250. Halfway through the year. But I want to show you this. Look, I want to show you this for two reasons. One, it's right at the end. So it's a big document to do with the minimum revenue position. Review of minimum revenue position. And basically what they're doing is restructuring the debt. They're restructuring the debt, and again you can see there's another 23 pages to read there, but you can pull it out of the executive summary. They're restructuring the debt to buy themselves breathing space. And when you restructure debt, you pay over a longer period of time. And here is the document. Do you remember how Abdul Jabbar just brushed over it and talked about they were waiting for the advice? Well, the advice is here. It's in the document. .9. I want to read 1.9 to you. Reducing the MRP charge does increase interest costs to the authority. These would be expected to be around £1.54. That's £137 million over the next 50 years. Can you see it? Oldham should carefully consider these costs when changing their MRP policy. That is the official guidance that is brushed over or pretended we haven't had. Do you see it there? Reducing the MRP charge does increase costs to the authority. That's you. These would be expected to be around £137,054,000 over the next 50 years. For those of you who are newer to me, this is what I've been doing for the last 6 years, and this is one of the many reasons as to why they have been so desperate to shut me down. I analyse, I critique, I wait for those moments like we've just seen by Abdul Jabbar, and I draw out, first of all, it's cost them £2 million for the redundancies, but more significantly, as their own advisors have warned them in their own document, in the executive summary of their document, the consequence of the restructuring of the borrowing, the minimum revenue position, is that over the next 50 years, the cost to you, the taxpayer, will be around, well, they reckon 137. That's with the interest rates now. Nah, it'd be 150, 200 million pounds. 150 million pounds around. And they've hidden it in plain sight. The only opposition party that has spoken out on this is, of course, the Conservatives. Lewis has spoken out on this, and he's focused on the £2 million of redundancy payments. But there's more here, much more here. And indeed, no wonder the finance executives are jumping ship. Just waiting for the Manchester Evening News page to load, which is always interesting. I'm not sure how anyone makes sense of that page. So, one of the issues the council has with the redevelopment and the capital redevelopment and all the Muse stuff is that they'd ring-fenced land for that Eton Academy. You know, the Star Academy? And there's a document at a previous cabinet meeting where they approved the buying of land that we already owned, was my understanding, the Tommyfield site. I think what they did was bought it off the trust that prevented the building on it to try and get rid of the covenant. I think that's what went on. Now, the government have basically said, and this is their own Labour Party government, have said we're not spending the money just yet. And we're reviewing everything on education because we need to spend money on fixing the roofs of existing schools. And so the consequence of that, let's try it another way. There you go. The consequence of that is this. A project that could transform lives has been put on hold, but Minister's promised answers are coming. And she's trying to rewrite history here because what else do we expect of someone like Charlotte Hall in the Local Democracy Service and the Manchester Evening News? Baroness Jackie Smith said money needed to be refocused on existing schools just to prevent the roofs from leaking. The Eton Star Academy is one of 33 new free school projects under review. Ministers decided to pause the project due to the challenging situations inherited from the former government. Oldham bosses remain optimistic about the project getting the go-ahead. Council leader Arud Shah previously suggested she is lobbying hard to get the government to see the value the school would add to the area. What she doesn't understand is that the 33 schools are a package. It's not just one. Apparently many parents were excited by the prospect. I don't remember that, but that's by the by. Oldham Council declined to comment, but sources say bosses are confident they had a strong case to put to the government. Okay. They bought the snipe in, didn't they? Well, how much for? $1 million? $2 million? To knock it down? To create that passageway through? To land that they'd ring-fenced and bought for a private school to be handed over to. We exposed it, and now it seems the Star Academy has stalled, and existing schools didn't want it here anyway. So what does that mean? Well, it means your town centre master plan can't go ahead because a big chunk of your town centre master plan was retrospectively bolted on to include a massive school. Game changers, eh? Yet another game changer. Okay. Moving on, another video I want to play. You'll have to give me a second. I'm not sure what is going on with my internet today. Here we go.
Team. Can I raise a point of order?
Go ahead.
The Conservative group have asked for clarification from the legal team prior to this meeting about the constitutional validity of this motion and have not had a reply. Could I have a reply, please?
Yes, it is through Councillor Sheldon. I know that the issues was effectively raised by a member of the Conservative group about whether or not the motion was within scope within the Constitution, and asked the Mayor. It's the Mayor that determines whether or not the particular motion is within scope. The Mayor has considered, the Deputy Mayor has considered, and they can indicate that they feel that in the circumstances the motion is within scope.
Can I just add to that? The Deputy Mayor has considered that on advice from myself and the monitoring officer, who both concur this is a perfectly reasonable motion to consider.
So what is that? That is to confirm that it is the Mayor that decides whether a motion can be debated in a full council meeting. That's Paul Entwistle, the former Borough Solicitor, confirming that, and it's also the still Chief Executive, 1 day a week, £40,000, Harry Caffrell, confirming that to a question asked by Graham Sheldon at a previous council meeting. What's happened is this. This is off the Conservatives' own Facebook page. The Chief Executive of Oldham Council, that's Shelley Kipling, Arud Shah's drinking partner, and acting Borough Solicitor, that's Alexander Bogatov, appointed without external interview into his role, have blocked our motion for full council on Wednesday, leaving the Conservatives without a motion and voiceless. The motion published below demanded they respect their vote held on Wednesday the 6th of November, which the administration lost, and as a result should have seen the council write a letter to Angela Rayner as Secretary of State to ask to leave places for everyone. We only found out it had been rejected 5 minutes before the deadline. This was deliberately done to prevent amendment. It is clear that the officers are now rigging democracy in order to protect the rotten Labour Independent Coalition Council. Let me read that sentence to you again. It is clear that the officers are now rigging democracy in order to protect this rotten Labour Independent Coalition Council. That is a statement issued on the Oldham Conservatives Facebook page. They're not alleging, they are providing the evidence, and that evidence clearly demonstrates that the officers are now rigging democracy in order to protect this rotten Labour Independent Coalition Council. Councillor Lewis Quigg goes on record to say the following: the tactics employed by the council would not go amiss in a place like Russia. It is clear that this Labour Independent Coalition Council is prepared to use all tactics necessary to close down democracy. Labour lost the vote on the 6th of November, and we are demanding the vote is respected. The officer's report was to inform, not decide. This is two-tier democracy. If Labour don't like it, they can seemingly ignore the vote. Either they respect the vote of the majority or they should resign from running the council. We live in democracy. We live in a democracy, not a dictatorship. This was the motion. I'll bring it up so you can read it along with me if you want. I'll bring it up. On Wednesday the 6th of November 2024, Oldham Metropolitan Borough Council voted to reject item 12, the Places for Everyone report. Sadly, events following the vote have meant that the vote has been undermined and simply ignored. We as elected members believe that this council is using whataboutery and I can't pronounce that word, to simply ignore a democratic vote and the clear will and majority in this chamber. The amended motion stated, quote, 2. On the back of the workshop, request the relevant council officers to present a thorough and full report to council in November 2024 to inform a decision on writing to the new Secretary of State to revoke PFE insofar as it relates to the Borough of Oldham. There was no ambiguity in the amendment, as it clearly asked that the officers inform a decision on writing to the new Secretary of State to revoke PFE insofar as it relates to the Borough of Oldham. It was to inform, not decide whether this council writes to the Secretary of State. It's there, in black and white, inform. The original motion from July 2024 was reviewed by the former Borough Solicitor and legally reviewed by the Greater Manchester Combined Authority. It was redrafted several times up to the vote in July 2024. The amendment to that original motion, as presented in the July 2024 meeting, faced the same checks by the former Borough Solicitor. So there was no double negative or any of that nonsense that Charlotte Hall and Joshi Pyjama wearing Ponce Herman have suggested in a desperate attempt to protect their Labour Party pals. We are aware, however, that the acting Borough Solicitor refused 2 amendments to the report at the meeting on Wednesday the 6th of November 2024. The report presented a motion within it titled Motion, and rather than listing recommendations to inform members, it issued a clear set of commands. These commands were contrary to the amended motion from July 2024, asking for it to inform a decision and not to decide whether this council should write to the Secretary of State. Writing to the Secretary of State was a natural consequence of enacting the July 2024 vote. Attempts to deflect, ignore and undermine the vote on Wednesday the 6th of November by the administration of Oldham Council, the Mayor of Greater Manchester and Oldham Metropolitan Borough Council shows contempt for elected members in the council and the wider public. In a helpful insight into the thinking of Labour Party, the former leader of Oldham Council, Sean Eric Fielding, who is now a Bolton councillor, Brightmart Ward, said, quote, just because you say we don't agree writing a letter is illegal doesn't mean you actually write a letter. The refusal to write a letter to the Secretary of State and use whataboutery is undemocratic. Therefore, the question remains, who is refusing to enact the democratic decision of a majority in this chamber? The officers, the leader of the council, the administration? Who? Therefore, so this is the motion, this council resolves that Oldham Metropolitan Borough Council has acted improperly and failed to respect the democratic decision of elected members from July the 24th Oldham Council meeting and November the 2024 Oldham Council meeting. In doing so, it has undermined the democratic legitimacy of this chamber and the elected members therein and has brought the council into disrepute. Advice given by the acting Borough Solicitor after the vote should have been addressed before the vote, not after the vote, of course. That the efficacy and advice of officers in drafting our motions, amendments and the reports is now investigated by an independent third-party legal investigation. The leader of the council is formally censured by this chamber for undermining the democratic legitimacy of Oldham Metropolitan Borough Council chamber and its elected members. Bogotoff, bent backdoor Bogotoff, 5 minutes before the deadline, rejected this motion, claiming he had the power to reject the motion, even though that video confirms that the power is for the mayor and the mayor alone. Confirmed by the previous Borough Solicitor and the Chief Executive. This is the email from Backdoor Bogotoff. Dear Councillor Quigg, I must admit I find this motion wholly inappropriate. Well, we couldn't care what you find. I find the fact that you're a former model who might have shoved cucumbers down your underpants wholly inappropriate. Boggart off. A motion is not to be used to create political circus. What in this is political circus? People are outraged. You are outraged. We are outraged. The town is outraged. Councillors are outraged that a vote has been ignored. How dare Boggart off claim it's political circus? If you wish to raise a formal complaint about an officer of the council regarding behaviours or their abilities, you have the ability to do that. A motion at full council is not a suitable forum to do that. Where is there a complaint about councillors? Do you see the word complaint? No. The term Lewis Quigg is using is that the efficacy and advice of officers in drafting in motions, amendments and reports is now investigated by an independent third-party legal investigation. What's wrong with that? That's not a complaint. That's wanting an investigation. They're not wanting the same Boggart off. You're meant to be a lawyer. Or is it baby oil and cucumbers, courgettes that you're more interested in? This motion is not acceptable on the basis that it is out of order, irregular or improper and is simply being used to criticise myself, the mayor, and censure the leader of the council. No, it's not. And it's not for you to decide. If you're not satisfied with the advice given in a previous meeting or generally, it can be raised in the correct manner, not in this manner. So backdoor Boggart off has blocked a motion and the mayor won't respond. Democracy in Oldham has completely collapsed. That is what you've just witnessed. Democracy in Oldham has completely collapsed. This is a dictatorship. This is a Labour Party run dictatorship aided by the convicted fraudster Brian Hoban, his sidekick Hindle, Mincy Boy and Navesy. And I've seen Mincy Boy's comments somewhere. Someone said, oh, Mincy Boy's now attacking Howard Sykes. He should have done this, he should have done that. Well, Mincy Boy, what was preventing you from putting forward a motion objecting to the council not doing what it was supposed to? What was stopping you from saying anything, Mincy Boy? Were you too drunk? Were you too high? Were you out with the chickens? Come on, Mincy Boy. Why didn't you submit a motion? It only needs two of you to submit a motion. Why didn't you submit a motion, Mincy Boy? What will happen now? I was told he has a liking for horses, but I just, Shaw's a sort of semi-rural place. So thinking maybe he was out in the backs with the chickens, Louise. Looking for eggs. Should have. He could have. He should have. Instead of writing a 5-page post on Facebook, he should have submitted a motion. You don't elect Mincy Boy or any of the councillors to write 5-page statements on Facebook when they're not submitting motions in the council chamber, getting paid tens of thousands of pounds. Where's your motion, Mincy Boy? The politics and the political division here between people really should be set aside, because if the council have done this to one group, and they've done it to Howard Sykes actually, and he's quiet, is in trouble. Yes, that's what I meant. The fox, chicken, yeah. They'll undermine at every occasion. Remember, this was the first vote that the Labour administration has ever lost since it took control in, 2010? So in nearly 15 years, this is the first vote that they've lost, and they've chosen to ignore the results. And that's because they bought off the borough solicitor by giving him the job there on an interim basis. Don't think that promotion didn't come without caveats. They've bought off the chief executive because she's got a job on an interim basis without due process. Do you think either of those people would have got the jobs they have through a competitive process? I don't. And that's where we are. There's a council meeting in a couple of weeks. I expect fireworks. What can they do? People ask me, what can they do? If it was me, and we've been here before, but now the parties, the political parties are exactly where we have been before. They're experiencing it directly. What can they do? If it was me and I had a coalition of people, I would stand up and walk out of that council chamber. On a matter of principle, that democracy has been destroyed in this town through a coalition of criminally aligned councillors and backdoor appointed council officers. I'd write to the Ombudsman, the government, demanding urgent intervention in Oldham Council. It doesn't matter if they say no, I'd still do it. But to demonstrate to the people of the town, of the borough, that we will not stand for this, walk out of the council chamber. Or argue and get thrown out, because this isn't democracy. A backdoor appointed borough solicitor who used to be a stripper or a model or whatever it is cannot dictate to those that we've elected 5 minutes before a deadline that your motion isn't suitable when he's had that motion with him for several days. And it isn't his position either. The Liberal Democrats and the Conservatives and the Independents in there have now come to the realisation that we have had for a number of years. All democracy in Oldham is broken, the politicians are corrupt, and the council officers are complicit. Welcome, you're now where we have been for some time, so what are we going to do about it? What are we going to do about it? If I was campaigning, I would pack out that council meeting. If I was a member of Shaw's Greenbelt group or Royton's Greenbelt group or any other Greenbelt group, I'd pack out that council meeting. I know they've got a public inquiry that they're pursuing, so it's in their interest to pack out the public gallery. It's in our interests for everyone who supported Lewis, Mark, Wilkins and any of those others to pack out the public gallery. I'm no longer campaigning the way I have been, so I'm not sure what I am going to do other than communicate what has gone on and share my views and opinions on what's gone on. Do I have a plan? Yes, of course I have a plan. Beyond packing out the public gallery, I would schedule a series of motions, coordinate them between now and next Christmas. I would look at the budget meeting coming up in February or March, where they set the budget, and I would vote that down, and that would collapse this council. Joan said nothing, has he? No, Dr. Joan said nothing. And indeed, Gary, unfortunately, some of us can't get to the meetings because they were attacked and abused by a councillor, and when you dared stand up and defend yourself, you were deemed to be out of order. Even though Mincy Boy provoked the situation, instigated the situation. But we've all been there before, haven't we, Gary? Remember Warren Bates, our dearly departed friend, falsely accused by an unnamed council officer of attacking a journalist outside? Charlotte Green, never happened. We were there, we were witnesses. But we've been here several years before. This is a corrupt council. Councillors with clear criminal connections, aided and abetted by council officers who are complicit, and in return they've been promoted into jobs they would never otherwise have got at all. And no, this is not normal behaviour in local democracy. The Conservatives, what I would do now immediately is I'd issue a statement. We have reported the interim borough solicitor, Alexander Bogatov, for misconduct in public office to Greater Manchester Police, and we are extremely disappointed that Greater Manchester Police has not contacted us. Therefore, we have no alternative but to raise this matter formally with Andy Burnham in his position as Police and Crime Commissioner seconded to Kate Green, and that would be the question I would go and ask on Thursday. That is a question Graham Sheldon, in his capacity as leader of the Conservatives, should be asking on Thursday. Not Lewis, not Dave, not Beth, not Max. That's what Graham Sheldon should be doing. And wager you my motorbike is not in his diary. Never mind even considering challenging the mayor on behalf of not just the other Conservatives but the rest of us who voted and supported them. Howard Sykes should be going to that meeting in his capacity as leader of the opposition to call out Andy Burnham on questioning the legality of decisions made in the council chamber. It is for us to decide, not for him to dictate. The deputy mayor's involved in the decision, but it's in the main if the mayor isn't there, it's delegated to him. But neither of them have spoken. I would be coordinating the opposition. I'd be walking out. I'd raising objections and walking out. And I would see who is walking out with me. If not for all the meeting, then a section of the meeting. And then I'd be hammering in motion after motion after motion, coordinating. You're only allowed one motion, well then have one motion. The Conservatives can have one. Lib Dems won't play along. I mean, their motion, and yes, for those who've asked me, I told you, didn't I? They weren't going to take a motion to do with places for everyone because the 6-month limit prevents them from. They've got some stupid motion to do with, I think it's a stupid motion. Write a letter to do with national insurance raises. It's cowardly, it's pitiful. The Royton Independents haven't got a motion. The sectarian group have got another motion to do with, they might as well rename themselves the Muslim mouthpiece. Their motions to do with something to do with boycotting Israeli linked companies. Fields of Independence, of course, haven't got a motion. Mincy Boy, of course, hasn't got a motion. I will tell them when to submit a motion. And then Mark Wilkinson's team have put a motion in to do with the Failsworth Library, the old Failsworth Library. It's not the best motion. It's pretty badly written, if you ask me, but I'll go through that another day. At least they've got submitted a motion. But no, I would coordinate that. Yes, I did, Gary. I said I'd get to Rayner. A couple of video clips I've got for Rayner.
You're going to add 3.4 million, or homes for 3.4 million people.
Here we go.
All right, let me ask you about another element of this. On the present densities, you're going to add 3.4 million, or homes for 3.4 million houses. On your own figures, we're also going to add to our population 2.5 million people over this same period. Are you content that more than 5 out of 7 new homes will go to immigrants?
Well, that's not the truth, and that's not the case.
That's what will happen?
Well, that's not the reality, because we've,
where
in particular,
where the 2.5 million immigrants that are in Rachel Reeves' budget figures going to turn out? Where are they going to live?
Well, there's plenty of housing in the UK, but the houses, especially social...
OK, let's pause it there first. She starts off by saying we've got a housing crisis, and it's something that they've been saying all this time. And now she's saying there's plenty of housing in the UK. And she's saying that off the back of Trevor Phillips, who, by the way, before anyone wants to call him racist, was the chair of the Race Equality Council, national one, and then the first chair of the Equality and Human Rights Commission. He's basically done the figures based upon the Labour Party's own figures of how many people are coming to live in the UK. And I have, this isn't an opinion of me on that at the moment. It's got nothing to do with that. He's just simply done the figures. He's not saying these people have any more right than anyone else or anything like that. And the calculation is 5 out of 7 new homes. 5 out of 7 new homes will have to house those who've come into the UK and are coming into the UK. And that's if they reach the target. And Angela Rayner says, no, we've got plenty of homes.
Well, hang on. You can't, on the one hand, say we've got to build this 1.5 million houses and then say there's plenty of housing already.
There is plenty of housing, Trevor, already, but there's not enough for the people that desperately need it. So the homes, especially under our affordable...
There's not enough homes for people who desperately need it. So that is Angela Rayner admitting that these homes will go to those who desperately need it. And then she goes on to try and quantify who she claims are those who desperately need it. And she talks about people fleeing domestic violence and veterans. However, I have yet to see anything in a housing policy in terms of what gets you up in the list that says veterans are immediately prioritised. I've not seen it. If you've seen it, tell me. We house our own before we house others. And of our own, these are the people we... So she's not said that, but what she's admitting to is that we need to house those who desperately need it first. There are enough homes, but not for those who desperately need it.
Homes programme, which is social and affordable housing, there will be there for people who desperately need them, local people. We've already outlined how we're going to support.
OK, and she also talks about local people. Remember that council motion, or that question, a number of months ago, last year, I think, to do with housing, and Elaine Taylor answered it? Well, here is Angela Rayner claiming that local people will be prioritised, veterans will be prioritised, and domestic people suffering domestic violence will be prioritised. To deflect away from saying immigrants will not be prioritised, because that's the context of the question. So she's saying now, or suggesting now, we're not going to prioritise immigrants, we're going to prioritise local people. Her own words, you heard it. Veterans, victims of domestic violence. She's lying out of her back teeth.
Veterans and people who are fleeing domestic violence.
Okay.
Councils need homes for people that are on the waiting list. I've already announced changes to the right to buy, making sure they have
this doesn't quite make sense.
so that we can deliver the houses they desperately need.
Deputy Prime Minister, doesn't quite make sense. You start the interview by telling me that there's a housing crisis. When I remind you that you have said yourselves as a government, we're going to need 2.5 million migrants. Some of them, by the way, people are going to build the houses. Suddenly, there's a lot of housing. Where are these people going to go?
Well, Trevor, first of all, when you say about building as well, the previous government did use...
OK, where are these people going to go? She doesn't answer the question. She deflects away about who is going to build the houses, and she goes on to talk about the previous government used migrants and we're going to train our own. This woman doesn't understand basic economics. If you're going to train your own to build houses, you've got a target of 1.5 million houses to build. If we're going to train our own, then it takes time to train our own. Secondly, even if we train our own, those companies who are building the houses won't necessarily hire our own. They'll hire those who are experienced to do their job at the least amount it'll cost them to hire them. So she avoids the question and comes up with an answer on a different question that's equally nonsensical.
Migrant labour far too much instead of actually building skills here in the UK. I've announced £140 million for new construction hubs so that we can train people here to deliver those housing. So I don't accept that we're going to bring migrants in for that. We've always said that actually we need to skill our own people up. But equally, we need to build the homes that people need. Nobody's had a focus on social housing for a generation, and I'm going to build those homes because far too many people at the moment are waiting on council housing lists, and I've got to fix that.
Okay, listen to this one. This one's important.
Show you a picture. I'm going to show our audience this. This is you as a local MP in 2017 opposing development.
You could have got me with my eyes open.
Well, there you are. There's perhaps a better photograph.
You see how young we were, we're little lads now, they're grown up.
Well, that's in 2017. You as a local MP representing your constituents there in a place where they didn't want a development. So in 2017, were you a naysayer and a blocker?
Well, we also had another site in Tameside which would have built the infrastructure and would have delivered homes for people, actually more homes for people as opposed to the field that they were going to build on. So I think actually the local plans are incredibly important because then you can identify where you think those houses should be built locally, and then you can make sure developers build there and you can make it a quicker process for them. So instead of them choosing sites that local people don't want, local people would have said, we want housing here, and developers will get the sweet spot because they'll get a fast track if they build it there. And that's what we're trying to do, is push them.
There you go. Angela Rayner, Deputy Prime Minister, in charge of all of this, is agreeing with us that local plans are incredibly important. If local people decide where the houses are needed to be built, then that process is fast-tracked and it makes complete sense. Who'd have thought it? Angela Rayner is agreeing with us, disagreeing with Andy Burnham. We've said a lot all along that our housing plan in Oldham should be a local plan developed by Oldham in consultation with the people of Oldham to be given to developers, put out to tender to say, these are the areas we need houses building in, come and build them. And we'll pay you for them, because the government has now got involved in house building. Who'd have thought it? Angela Rayner actually agreeing with us, which means if the letter, so we connect the dots, people, if that letter had gone to her, and this is today by the way, if that letter had gone to her, worded in the right way, she would have no option other than to support Oldham withdrawing from places for everyone. Do you see? Thank you for joining me. I look forward to seeing as many of you as possible at the Mill on Tuesday evening. If you want help with your questions for Thursday, do get in touch and I'll sit down and go through it with you. And I agree with you, she might be dizzy, she might be all of those things, but we've pinned her down where she is agreeing with us. Local plans are incredibly important. She supports local plans. The Places for Everyone scheme predates this government, and based on what she's said, she would have to sign off Oldham's withdrawal from Places for Everyone. Which is why I very much look forward to seeing what the opposition, councillors and parties do a week on Thursday. My name is Raj Amir. See you all soon. Good night.
Do not fear them. Do not fear any of them.
On the 20th of November 2003, James Ignatius O'Rourke McMahon was elected councillor for the Failsworth East Ward of Oldham. Deeply ambitious, he ruthlessly rose to power, and by 2011 he was already leader of the council. In 2015, exploiting a Labour Party loophole, he became MP for Oldham West and Royton. If only the people of the town knew then what they now know.
Do not fear them. Do not fear any of them.